Using this task tracker led to a $10,000 raise at work and made me one of the most organized people in the company, and it's so easy to use. I personally use the Google Sheets version at work because I like Google Sheets way better than Excel, but a lot of you have said that you can't use Google at work, so here's the Excel version for you to use instead. The first thing we'll do is open up a new spreadsheet, then select cells A1 through G1, and we're going to change the fill color to be blue. You can make it whatever you want though, it's your spreadsheet. Then we'll select A2 through K2, and we'll change the fill color to a different shade of blue that's a little bit lighter, but once again, you can make this color scheme however you'd like it. I'm going to resize column A to make it pretty small. Then I'll resize column B to make it a little bit bigger. And in cell B1, I'm going to put start date. We'll make column C just a little bit bigger. And we're going to change the format of this cell to be a short date. And this is where you'll put your start date for the week. So I usually put Monday since I work Monday through Friday. But if you work a different schedule, just put the date for the first day that you work. In cell D1, we'll put completed and make that just a little bit bigger. And we'll make column E just a little bit bigger, but we'll skip over the formula for now. All right, and with my color scheme, it's a little bit hard to read. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of that column and make the text font white. I'm going to make it bold. And if you want to change the font, you can do so quickly here. But since this is just a tutorial, I'm just going to leave it as is. The font's a little bit too small in my opinion though, so I'm going to make sure I select it and make it a little bit bigger. And now we're going to move to row 2. So in cell A2, we're going to type a number sign. Then in B2, we'll put type. In C2, we'll put ad hoc tasks, or you can just put tasks, whichever one you prefer. Then progress/status. Then in E2, priority. Then link. Then task focus. Then value add. Task added. Task started. And finally, task completed. Now I'm going to select columns G through K and make those cells a little bit bigger. And realistically, once you start getting into using the tracker, you'll be able to adjust the width to the proper location however you want it. I'm going to make column C a little bit bigger so that way I have more space to read the tasks. Then I'm going to click on C1 and I'm going to left align it. And then on B1, I'm going to right align it and add a colon. That way it's formatted a little bit better so you can read it. Now before we go any further, we want to make sure we save our file in the correct format. So I'm going to go ahead to whatever location I want. And instead of the default file format, we want it to be macro enabled. So you'll see this .xlsm, that's the one that you want. And the reason why we need this in this format is because we're going to set up macros a little bit later for the automation. And if it's in the wrong format, it won't work. All right, so we'll go ahead and name it to whatever we want and hit save. And now we can keep going. I'm going to right click on sheet 1, then click on rename. And I'm going to put this as task list. And yes, the name of these tabs do matter. If you want to change them, you'll have to adjust the code later on. We'll right click on the tab and click move or copy. Then say create a copy, end of sheet. Okay. And then we'll rename this one as parked. And once again, make sure it is this name exactly. Then we'll right click, move or copy, create a copy, move to end of sheet, hit OK. Then we'll right click on the new one, rename that one as done. And those are the 3 tabs where the naming matters, everything else will not. On the done tab, we're going to copy K2 and paste it in L2 and rename it as start week. And we're all set up with formatting. So now I'm going to go back to my task list and we'll build the automatic counter. In cell A3, we'll type equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, C3, close parentheses, comma, quote, quote, max, open parentheses, $, A, $2, colon, offset, open parentheses, A3, comma, -1, comma, 0, close parentheses, plus 1, close parentheses. All right, so now the formula is built and by default it should be blank. Let's test it out. In cell C3, if we type any letters, you should see a 1 appear. And if it does, that means it's working. Now before we drag this down to the rest of the rows, make sure that A2 only is anchored in with the $signs. Everything else should not be anchored in. And that will make the formula dynamic so we can drag it down. So we'll click the fill handle in the bottom right hand corner and drag it down just a few to make sure it works. And as you can see in the formula, everything's shifted down except for that anchored in A2. And if we type in text, you should see it populate with an automatic counter. And if we type in text with multiple, you should see that the numbers match accordingly. So everything appears to be working correctly, so we're good to proceed. So we'll delete everything in column C, and then we'll drag that formula down all the way to the end of column A, or however far you want to go. Now we're going to set up our dropdown, so I'll select B3 all the way through the end of column A, then go to Data, Data Validation, then Data Validation again. In the dropdown, we'll select List, and then under Source, we'll type our data. So we want to have unplanned, comma, planned, comma, weekly, recurring, comma, monthly, recurring, comma, unable to start, comma, and follow-up. And make sure you put the commas in between, then hit OK. So if you did it right, you should see these drop-downs with all the options present on the drop-down. Now we're going to do the same exact thing for progress/status. So we'll select D3 all the way through the end of column D, go to Data, Data Validation again, select List, and this time under Source, we're going to put Done, comma, Pending, comma, Next week, comma, Not started, comma, Ready, comma, Parked, comma, dash. And once again, make sure that everything is separated by a comma, then hit OK. And if you did that correctly, you should be able to select any of the cells and then see those options present. We'll do the same thing under priority, so we'll select E3 all the way through the end of column E. Then under data validation, we'll select list, and this time under source, we'll put top, comma, high, comma, medium, comma, low, comma, unable to start, comma, follow up, comma, recurring. Then we'll hit OK. All right, so we need to do one more drop down, but before we do, we need to add a new tab. So we'll click on the plus button, move that tab all the way to the end. Then we'll rename that tab as worksheet. And in that worksheet, we'll go to cell A1 and make it a little bit bigger. And we'll type task focus. And then we'll select however many you think you need. This is where you'll put all your different task focuses, so it depends on your position. But you can select more than you need if you want to. We'll change the background fill color to whatever we want. I'll make the header look like a header just a little bit to make it easier to read. We'll add some borders. We'll click on A1, change the text font to be white, and center it. And lastly, make it bold. And we should be good to go. You can format it however you want. All right, so now we're going to go back to the task list. And we'll select cells G3 all the way through the end of column G. Go to Data, Data Validation, and in that list, we'll select List as well. But this time, we'll click on the little icon to the right. We'll go to Worksheet and select cells A2 all the way through the end of your selection. So instead of seeing a list, you'll see a range, and we'll hit OK. Now, if you use the dropdown, you'll see that it's blank. But if we were to go into our worksheet and we type in anything into the task focus, and we go back to our task list, now you'll see whatever you typed into your task focus range listed in that dropdown. So it's dynamic and you can change it to whatever you'd like. All right, unlike Google Sheets, you can't add colors to your dropdown, so you need to set up conditional formatting. So we'll select all of column B, go to conditional formatting, select new rule, then under style we'll put classic, and I want to have format only cells that contain. We'll change specific text to cell value, change this to equals to, and then click on the little icon and put planned. Then we'll go to the format with, use the drop down to select custom format, click on fill, and then select whatever color we want. I'm going to put this light green. And if you want to add borders, fonts, whatever, you can add those there. Then hit OK, and then hit OK. So now if I select plan from the drop down, it'll have a green background. Now we'll select all of column B again, go to conditional formatting, this time select managed rules. And you'll see that rule that we just created. We'll click duplicate rule, double click on it, click the little icon to the right, and change the text to be unplanned instead. Then we'll go back to format with custom format and change the background color to whatever you want. I'll make this orange, then hit OK. Then I'll hit OK again. And if it marks it as stop if true, you can uncheck that. And you'll follow these steps to duplicate this over and over again until you meet all the options. So by the end, you should have unplanned, planned, weekly recurring, monthly recurring, unable to start, and follow up as your options. And then once you're done, you simply hit OK. So now let's test it out. We'll click on one of the drop downs and go through our cycles. So we have planned, unplanned, weekly recurring, monthly recurring, unable to start, and follow-up, and every single one of those has a unique background, so we're good to go. Now we're going to do the same exact thing for our progress/status options. So I'll select all of column D, go to Conditional Formatting. This time we'll take a shortcut and go to Highlight Cells If equals to, and that will automatically format it as we need. We'll click on the right side icon, and just like last time, we'll type in the different options. So for the first one, we'll type Not Started. In the Format with dropdown, we'll select Custom Format, and then we'll go to the Fill tab and change the background color to whatever you want. I'm going to change it to blue. And it's a little bit dark, so I'm going to change the font to white. Then I'll hit OK. And then I'll hit OK again. All right, so let's test it out. I'm going to use one of the drop downs, select Not Started. And then you should see it blue with a white text. All right, now everything's going to work the same exact way as it did before. So we'll select column D, go to Conditional Formatting, Manage Rules, Duplicate Rule, double click into one of the rules, and we'll update the status options and colors. And by the end of it, you should have a full list, and they can be whatever colors you want, but we'll have something for done, not started, next week, ready, pending, and parked. And you can make sure that nothing is checked where it says stopped if true. And we're all set with that one, so we can hit OK. Now let's test it out to make sure we don't have any typos. So I'll go ahead and select each different option, and that should give us a different color background for all of them. And if that is true, then we're good to go. You don't need to have a background color for a dash, but you can if you want to. Now we'll do the same exact thing for priority. So we need to have a different color for all of our different options. We have top, high, medium, low, unable to start, recurring, and follow-up. And make sure stop if true is not selected. And everything looks good, so we'll hit OK. And we can test it out here as well. So I'll cycle through all the different options to make sure that every single one has a different background. And there's no typos in there blocking it. And it looks like everything does, so we are good to go. Now for the task focus, we have different dummy information in there, so we're not going to set any conditional formatting up. I don't use it personally for task focus. I don't find it needed, but you're more than welcome to set it up later if you want to. All right, now we're going to create the completed counter. So we'll type equals count ifs, open parentheses. We'll go down to the Done tab, select all of column K, then we'll put a comma. And in quotes, we'll put greater than or equals to, an ampersand. Then we'll go back to our task list and select cell C1. And that's what contains the date. Then we'll put a comma, go back to our Done tab, select cell K again, put a comma, inside quotes, we'll put less than or equals to, back to the task list, select cell C1, plus 7. Close parentheses, plus count ifs, open parentheses, and we'll select cells D3 all the way through the end of column D, put a comma, then in quotes we'll put the word done, then we'll put another comma, and this time we're going to select cells E3 all the way through the end of column E, and if you're already at the bottom, you can go ahead and start from the bottom up to the top if you want, and after a comma we'll put recurring in quotes. And what this formula will do is anything on the Done tab where that was completed between the start date and 7 days from the start date, it will be included in the counter, plus anything that's on the task list tab that's marked as done and in recurring. So the done recurring task worked. Now let's test out the Done tab, but before we do, we don't need the row 1 that's in the Done tab, so we can delete that. And we'll do the same exact thing for the Park tab as well. So we'll delete that, then go back to our Done tab and add a date under task completed, and you can see that it increased to 2. So everything is working properly. All right, in reality, we don't actually need that timestamp, so I'm going to go ahead into the Done tab and delete that date. And as you can see, the counter decreased to 1. So everything's looking good. Now, before we move on, I want to go ahead and save everything. And once again, make sure it's in that macros enabled format because we're about to add the automation. So regardless of if you're watching this on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, you'll see a link in my bio that brings you to my beacons page. You can find all of my pre-built templates in this link right here, but we're going to go to the app script code. Now, app script is only for Google Sheets, so we need to not use the app script portion, so we'll click on my name. Then we'll go to VBA instead. And VBA is what Excel uses instead of app script to run their automation. You'll see 2 original trackers. We don't want those, we want the ones for upgraded. So we'll click on Upgraded Tracker, Task Link Code. We'll click Copy Raw File, then go back to our spreadsheet. Then on the Task Link tab, we'll right-click and select View Code. Double-click on the Task Link sheet. and then we'll paste the code we just copied in the box to the right. So it should look like this when you're done. And now we're going to go back to our GitHub to get the rest of the code. And you can select VBA here and go to Parked tab. Then we'll click this button to copy the raw code again. Go back to our spreadsheet, double click on the Parked sheet, and paste the code that we just copied. It'll probably look a little bit similar, but it's different, trust me. Then we'll go back to the GitHub, and we can just use the side panel right here to go to the next one. So we'll click on the one that says Module 1, copy the raw code, go back to our spreadsheet. Then we'll right click on the folder and hit Insert Module. You'll see Module 1 populate, and you'll paste that code inside Module 1. Then we're going to go ahead and insert another module, so that way it says Module 2. We'll go to the GitHub, select Module 2, copy the raw code, go back to the Excel file, double click on Module 2, paste that code. Then we'll click on that folder, insert module, so that way there's a Module 3. Go back to the GitHub, select Module 3, copy the code, go back to the Excel file, make sure Module 3 is selected, and paste it. And now we're going to save that code and run it and exit out. All right, before we do anything else, we want to go ahead and save the file again. That way, if we have any bugs, errors, or anything like that, we can fix those without having to reapply the code. And once again, make sure it's in the proper format for you to be able to save. Now I'm going to exit out of Excel entirely, reopen the file, and then click Enable Macros. And I'm just going to put some dummy data in here, that way we can test things out in live format. So when you mark a task as not started, you should see a timestamp appear under Task Added. And we'll go ahead and add some more data, that way we can test things out a little bit further. When you change the status to pending, you should see another timestamp appear under Task Added. If you mark it as parked, you should be able to go to the Park tab and see that row moved entirely over to that tab. And when you mark it as pending, it should disappear from the Park tab and go to the bottom of the task list. So we can go ahead and mark it as pending again, and the timestamp would update. And if we mark it as done, the row should automatically move from the task list to the bottom of the Done tab. And it should add a timestamp of the week start that matches the start date on your task list. Now we're going to create a custom sort. So I'm going to go to Excel, then select Preferences, Custom Sort. And in the left box, we're going to type all of our different entries separated by a comma. So we'll put recurring, comma, top, comma, high, comma, medium, comma, low, comma, unable to start, comma, follow up. And you need to put them in the order that you want to sort in. And once you press Add, you should see the list show up in the custom lists. And now we can exit out of this screen. Now I'm going to select cells A2 all the way down through the end of the spreadsheet. Then on the home page, I'm going to select Filter. And now we can go up to the top for the priority and use the filter. Now instead of sorting ascending, but first we're going to select by color, and then we'll select font color, custom sort, and you'll see some default options generated. But what we want to do is for the column, we want to select priority, ensure it says values, and under order, we'll select that new custom sort that we just created, then hit OK. So as you can see, the priority order is in the same exact order as we put. And if we add a new task later on, all we have to do to update the order is simply click on ascending. So I'll add the data, then we'll go to our priority filter, click on ascending, and as you can see, the task is now right next to the other low priority task, so it's in the order just like we described. All right, now we're going to build a bunch of pivot tables, so we need some data to build off of. So I'm going to go through all of my dummy data and make those pending, and then mark them all as done, and you'll see them automatically move from the task list and be added to the bottom of the Done tab. And you don't need a whole lot of data, we just need to have enough values in there to build a table off of. So now when we go to our Done tab, you'll see all the different tasks that we just completed. And now we're going to select all of columns B through L, go to Insert, Pivot Table, Existing Worksheet, use a little icon to the right, go to our worksheet, and then pick a random cell. It doesn't really matter where as long as it's not in the task focus grid. All right, now we need to configure our pivot table. So first we'll set up our task focus values. So I'll select task focus and drag it underneath columns. Then I'll scroll down and I'll select start week and drag it underneath row. And then I'll select ad hoc tasks and drag those underneath values. Now if you notice, we only have one option for start week, and that's because all of the values that we completed have the same exact start week. So I'm going to go back into our data and I'm going to put something else inside of there. And now you can see we have different breakdowns. And the two that we're going to start building off of is the month and then just the week itself. So we'll start with just the week. So I'm going to drag out the other two that I don't need. And everything looks good. Now I don't want to see the blanks, so I'm going to select the filter for the rows and say greater than 0. So now if the date is greater than 0, it will be included. If not, it won't. I'm going to copy the entire pivot table, go several rows over to the right to anticipate future data, paste it, drag out that start week, drag back in that start week, and we're going to get rid of everything except for months. And you can see here that we have some months, but we also have something that says less than a date, and that means that there's blanks. So let's go ahead and just refresh that filter, and now we're good to go. Now I'm going to copy the entire pivot table, go several columns over to the right to anticipate future data, and this time we're going to drag out the task focus and drag type under columns. And it looks like the rows are filtered, but there is a blank in the columns. So to fix this, we want to do a column filter. So instead of going to the original row filter, we'll go to the column filter and uncheck blanks. So now that blank is gone and we're good to go. I'm going to copy this entire pivot table, go several columns over to the right and paste it. And we'll do the same thing, but this time we want it to be the start week instead of months. But everything else looks good. We're going to go ahead and copy that pivot table. And just like before, we'll go several columns over to the right to anticipate future data, and we'll paste it. This time we're going to get rid of type, and we'll put priority under columns. And as you can see, we have a blank present under priority. So we're going to click on the filter and redo that. So we'll put greater than 0. Press enter, and we're good to go. We also have a blank in our priority labels, but this time we're going to try doing greater than 0 just like we did before. And it looks like that clears it. That's a bit cleaner. And it will anticipate future data. So we're going to change the original label. So instead of it being, we're going to change that to greater than 0. And it works the same way. So essentially, if it's a row filter or a column filter, just put greater than 0 and it should filter out everything that's blank. Now we're going to copy the pivot table, go several columns over to the right, paste that again. And this time we're going to take out the start week, put it back in, and we want it to be months instead. So we'll get everything out except for months. So now we have all the 6 pivot tables that we need. We don't need all of these grand totals though. So I'm going to right click on the grand totals and select remove grand total. And I'll do this for every single pivot table that we have. So it should be bare without any grand totals for all of them. All right, so now that all the grand totals are removed, everything looks good. And now we want to add a new tab at the bottom by clicking on the plus button. And we'll rename that as visualizations. And you can name this whatever you want, it won't matter. We'll go back to our worksheet tab, click into that first pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, then select pivot chart. And you'll see this default chart pop up. We're going to go ahead and cut that chart, go to our visualizations tab and paste it. And now we want to format this. So we're going to click into it, then go to chart type. And we're going to change this to the middle stack bar chart actually. I made a mistake and selected the right one. I fixed that later, so you can go ahead and just check the middle one. And we're going to drag the corners to make it a little bit bigger to make it easier to read. Then I'll click back on design, select add chart element, chart title, above chart. And we're going to rename this as task focus by week. And once you're done, you can just click off of it to save it. So we're all set there. I'm going to go back to my worksheet, click on the second pivot table, click on pivot table analyze, pivot chart, copy that chart, go to our visualizations tab, and paste it just underneath. And I'm going to resize it, make it look similar in size to the other one. And then up in our menu bar, I'm going to go back up to design. And just like last time, we're going to select change chart type, go to column, and we'll select the middle one. And as you can see, the columns are different heights, which is how we want it. And now we're going to fix the top chart. So we'll select the chart and change it to that middle one as well. And they should both be the same size since they're both based off the same values. We'll go back to design, then go to add chart element, chart title, above chart. And this time we'll to task focus by month. And that's everything we need for this. So that's how to do the charts. You're going to do the same exact thing for all 6 charts. And by the end of it, you should have 6 charts, 1 for task focus, 1 for type, 1 for priority, and both of those for the week as well as the month. And once you have those, you can go to View, Uncheck Grid Lines, and that will make this tab look a little bit neater with just the charts. All right, so now everything is built, so let's go back to our task list and try it out. So under type, I'm going to go ahead and put unplanned. We'll put whatever task name we want to put there. We'll start with not started. We'll select a priority, I'll put high. Let's change it to pending. Both of those timestamps worked. And then we'll hit done. And once it's marked as done, the pivot tables will automatically update, and it will automatically be reflected in the chart as well. So you should see both the pivot table and the chart increase by 1 for that week. And we didn't here, and that's because I have a blank. And that's because I forgot to add the task focus before I sent it in. So I'm going to go ahead and add the task focus. And when you send a task to done, it automatically updates the pivot table. But if you change it in the done tab, it won't. So we'll click on the pivot table, then click on refresh all. And now everything's working properly. So everything's good to go and you're ready to start tracking your tasks. I hope you liked this tutorial and like and subscribe for more.